I was very influenced by the story of the Burpo family. Their son Colton was about 4 years old, and he had this really painful side ache, and so they live in a small town, and they took him to the local hospital, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They checked about his appendix, they checked everything that they could at that hospital. They'd ruled out a lot of things, including appendicitis and some other common things that you would think would happen in the stomach area, where he was feeling this intense pain. Well, it got really bad. It got so bad that he became really limp, and they decided to keep staying at that hospital to see if they could figure things out, because the larger hospital was quite far away, and they felt confident with the answers they were hearing at the time. But that confidence began to wane, and they obviously were praying the whole time. I mean, he's a pastor, bivocational. They all had several jobs to try to provide for the family. And he and his wife decided they needed to take him. So they discharged him, and they called ahead to the other hospital. And when they went there, they found out it was appendicitis, and it was dangerous at this point. And so they said they had to have surgery immediately. So they brought him in, and he was dying. And it did not look good even with the surgery. And so here you have this young family with a 4-year-old boy who's dying. That was not their plan. That was not what was written out on the agenda for their life. And the dad was just so overwhelmed. He went to another room, found some little, it's a big hospital, so he just found some room, either a work room or whatever, and just went in there and started praying. But it wasn't the normal type of prayer. It was the yelling, screaming, cussing at God, dishonorable type of prayer is how Todd Burpo describes it. And so he just raged at God, because after everything I've done for you, you're going to take my boy? I've served you faithfully? Is this what you do to your pastors? Whew. I wasn't a pastor at the time that I heard this story, but it was, like I said, it was a very influential moment. Well, the boy came back. I say he came back because he entered into heaven. The parents didn't know that. They just knew that their son made it through the surgery and woke up screaming, asking for dad. But one of the things that the boy started doing from then on out was he started to over and over remind his mom and dad, hey, just so you know, Jesus loves the little children. Because he'd heard Jesus say that to him. He'd heard it in the house of heaven. And it became so much. He said it so often as they were coming home, leaving, going to church, not at church, dropping them off at school, whatever. Todd had to tell his son, look, it's okay. You've done your job. God is pleased with you. You've told everybody. Message delivered. It didn't stop him. Because for little Colton, he experienced this love. This overwhelming love that we talk about with everyone that's been in the presence of God, that has been to heaven and then back. And this 4-year-old boy put it in words that he could understand over and over again. The thing that we learn about heaven, and primarily about God's presence, is that the most powerful, overwhelming element of that experience is his love. And when you try to explain it, the words always fall short. And when you are surrounded by that. Like Colton, like Don Piper, like me. You're in this situation where you're saying to yourself, why me? Why me? This kind of love? It feels as if it's not fair. I mean, that feeling quickly disappears because the love is just too strong. It just blows it away. But God made it clear. This is who he is. And John, one of the disciples, one of the three, wrote in his letter in 1 John 1:5, this is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light, in him there is no darkness at all. Now this light is not a luminosity. It's this understanding that you are recklessly, luxuriously loved, and not because of anything you've done. I mean, when everyone that has entered the gates of heaven or been just outside, the thing they describe the most is this light. And that light is that unconditional love. Goes on to say in 1 John 4:18, later, John, who walked with Jesus, he said this. He says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. When you enter the gates of heaven, or when you're in the presence of God, which happens here on earth, you can't control it. You can only experience it when God thinks it's necessary. But when it happens, that fear of why me disappears. Because light and dark can't occupy the same space. And the thing about this love is that we must be worth it. It's not based on us, it's based on who he is. And that's what makes it so beautiful. Well, when Colton woke up screaming for his dad, he said later that year, because pieces of his experience came out. He's a little 4-year-old boy. He's not giving long stories about it. He's living life as a little boy. But his experience of heaven would leak out throughout. And it got to the point where they said, we got to write this book. Like, we got to keep track of everything he said. And so they started writing about the entire experience, and especially about Colton's experience in heaven and what he saw. And so one of the things that slipped out was Colton said to his dad, you remember when I woke up in the hospital and I was screaming for you? He goes, yeah. That was the most beautiful sound in the world. He goes, well, I was calling you because Jesus said that I had to go back because of your prayer. Todd Verpo felt dirty and unworthy after that prayer. It was honest. It was like a psalm, written raw and everything. And so when he prayed it, he was just honest before the Lord. And Todd's response was, that prayer? That's the prayer that you answered? That's a reminder to us. When we talk about heaven, we talk about God, his presence, and who he is, and the nature of this relationship, and the way that things are supposed to be. It is never going to be based on what we do. It's never going to be based on our behavior. It's going to be based on his love and us submitting to that. Heaven is where God is. And where God is the house of love, the house of light. Don't wait to think about it later. Experience it now. Know it. Believe it. May God bless you.